All right, time to get rolling here. Welcome to Giraffe 102. This month, we are going to focus on geospatial data and everything you need to know, all of the formats, how to find data sources, how to upload them into Giraffe, and then how to use those data sources to um, do some investigation. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Holly. I am the customer success manager for North America and Europe at Giraffe. And I'm really excited to bring you all this webinar today. A couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can feel free to unmute and ask your question live. But I will also be monitoring the meeting chat. So if you would rather, you can just type your question in the meeting chat. And we'll leave some time open at the end for questions as well. This meeting is being recorded, so we'll upload that recording to YouTube as soon as I can download it from Zoom. And if you have any questions that come up after the meeting is over, feel free to email me directly. I'm just holly@giraffe.build. And with that, let's get started here. So as I mentioned, the topic of today's webinar is all the geospatial data. So in Giraffe, we typically refer to our geospatial data as layers. And those layers are a GIS database. It contains features representing real world objects or places like parcels, streets, postal codes, census tracts, almost anything you can think of. And the features can be points, lines, polygons, or even text. And the layers can also include things like raster images, thinking satellite imagery, or even there are some services that contain 3D models. Each feature in the layer is visually represented, and then it also has metadata about that feature. You can create really great maps and really great contextual information in Giraffe using a combination of multiple layers, either from the same data source or from multiple data sources, and we'll go into that today. I wanted to give a rundown of the kinds of geospatial data that Giraffe can ingest first, just as some good base information. So Giraffe can support vector, raster, and API sources. The vector sources are things like GeoJSON, shapefiles, KMLs, and even things like CAD or a CSV spreadsheet. And these data sources are point in time. So that means when you upload it, it contains the information that it contains at the time of upload, but it's not going to be automatically updated. So if that data source had changes to it made by the data author, you would have to re-upload that source again to see that information. Raster data sources are things like JPEGs, PNGs, PDFs, also files that you just upload live. And you would have to upload those again if you needed to change the data in those file types. And then lastly, we have API data sources. And the advantages of these is that the data gets updated, synced live with the database from which it comes. So if I have something uploaded from the city of Los Angeles, and it is via their Esri server that they made available publicly. If they make any changes to that data set, I will receive it immediately in my Giraffe project as soon as they publish it. So those API links are really, really useful and helpful for data that, especially data that gets updated relatively often. So you don't have to go searching for that point in time upload multiple times. The downside to the APIs is sometimes they're a little bit difficult to find if you're not familiar with how to search for them. So we'll spend a little bit of time today going over how to search for those APIs. I do want to mention that we have a couple of data types that you might run into that we don't currently support. So those are Carto databases, Leaflet, and then for your vector or raster uploads, we do have a upload limit of 10 megabytes. So if you're looking at a data set that is enormous, your best bet is going to be seeing if you can find an API link to that data set, because then the size doesn't become a concern, or see if you can get a reduced version of that data set, maybe that only contains the applicable information for the area that you're doing your exploration in. You can edit often a lot of these vector data sets in other programs like QGIS, which is free. If you have Esri, any other kinds of spatial editors, if you are savvy with that, you could edit your shapefile, for instance, to make it the right size. But typically what we find when that shapefile is enormous is that you're going to be better off with either an API or just finding another way to get it in there, because it's going to be so huge that it'll bog down your whole project. So we do, if you are a customer and you do have a data set that is like super important to you that you have to get in and it's over 10 megabytes, just talk to me and we can help you out with that. But it does become a performance issue. So that's why we have that 10 megabyte limit. All right. So like I mentioned, there's sort of a good, better, best for your data types. Good, I would say just your rasters like JPEGs, DXF, and CSV. We'll go through some of these when we start uploading data later on. Better would be map servers, scene servers, WMS, Mapbox, and KML. And then the best data types, these are like the gold star that I love using in Giraffe, are Esri feature servers, specifically GeoJSON and shapefiles. And the reason for that is you can use Giraffe Lens or the data table to explore and style these types of data sets. We'll take a look at that later, what that means, but you're going to see very quickly what the advantage is of using these types of data when you're uploading layers to Giraffe. So like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes the hardest part about using outside data in your Giraffe project is just finding it. So let's take a look at how to do that now. So the first thing you can do if you are looking for layers to add to your Giraffe project is just go in and search through the Giraffe layer library. We have over 1,000 layers uploaded that are just open data sets from around the world, and we try to get the ones that are going to be used very widely, country by country. So for the US, some of my favorite layers that I like to use in my projects are things like the FEMA flood layer. Just add that here. Our USGS contours, and our wetlands layer. And this is from the Fish and Wildlife Service. So I've just added those layers to my project straight from the Giraffe library. I didn't have to go searching for them anywhere else. They're already ready to go in here. They'll take a second to load up here because I am sharing my screen on Zoom, but you'll see this coming. So like the contours are loading in now. I'm seeing a little bit of the floodplain data loading in. So this is what I was mentioning earlier when I was talking about a layer being a collection of shapes with metadata attached to them. So if I were to sort of right click on one of these shapes and mouse over it here, on my on my left-hand side here, I can actually see all of the metadata that is attached to that shape. So this is all coming from that API connection to this, I believe, is the flood zone. So it's connected to that FEMA flood data set. And I can see things in here like the field zone, the zone subtype, the sort of interesting information like the area of the shape. All of this is controlled by the data provider. And it can be really useful to sort of understand what these fields mean and also be able to search through them. So we'll show you a little bit of that in a moment. So that was super easy, of course, but what if there's something out there that Giraffe doesn't have yet? How do I get that into my Giraffe project? And I'm sure that's the main reason of why everyone is here. So let's go looking for some data that we don't have yet in our project. I have a few handy Google search terms that I like to use that often help me find the data sets that I'm looking for. The first one that I always try is really simple. It's just the city name plus the keyword open data. I'm going to be demonstrating in Philadelphia today because Philadelphia, one, is where I live, and two, has one of the best open data repositories in the country. They were kind of one of the first to go out there and really make their tech really publicly accessible. So they've got really good stuff going on. So if I just search Philly open data, I'm going to find a series of websites that might be useful to me. I can start clicking into these websites, and at this point, it's sort of sleuthing. Every city is going to be in a different format and have their own website layouts, but oftentimes they have pretty similar kinds of keywords. And, I'm probably going to find things in the planning and zoning keyword interesting to me. So I'm going to click in there and then just see what options I have here. Building demolitions is interesting to me, especially as an API data source, because I can see here that they know this data set is updated daily. So I'm definitely going to want to connect to that API if this is something I want. And then I can see here a list of the resources. So let's click on this LNI Demolitions API and just see what we get. And like I was mentioning before, this data set is published to Carto here. And Carto is actually a data type that we don't directly connect to yet. So that sort of came up as a dead end for me, but that doesn't mean that it's the end of the road. So I still want this demolitions data, but I want it in a format that I can input into Giraffe. So I'm going to go to another tab and I'm going to search Philadelphia. Whoops, did not want to open that. I'm going to search for Philadelphia demolitions GIS and see what I get. And now this is looking very promising because it's taking me to an ArcGIS website. And these ArcGIS links are, like I mentioned before, we can import ArcGIS APIs. So your map servers, your feature servers, your scene servers, your image servers, all of those things can be uploaded into Giraffe as data sets. So this tells me I have access to that same data set that at first glance was not compatible in Giraffe in another location. This is typically what you will see if it is in sort of an ArcGIS gallery that they make public. And the way that you find the actual link that you need is by scrolling down here on the right-hand side. You're going to see a URL box. And the URL that you want is going to contain the keyword feature server, map server, image server, or scene server at the end. Those are the different types of Esri servers that we can connect to. Map server and feature server are going to be the ones you find most often. So this is great. I found an API URL and I can use this. I'm just going to show you what that API endpoint looks like before I load it into Giraffe, because you may also see sites that look like this. And you're probably thinking, this looks like nothing. Like, this is not a styled website. What am I even looking at? And that's because it's just the API endpoint. You can get some interesting information from these sometimes. Like if I click in a little bit further, I'm going to get a outline of all of the fields that are going to be included when I upload this to Giraffe. So this is really useful to get sort of a preview of what kind of information I'm going to get. But let's now take this. So we did all that work. I typed in all these keywords into Google, and I finally found something that's useful. So now I want to add it to my Giraffe project, and it's really easy. You're literally just going to copy this URL, go to your Giraffe project, and I like to do it by clicking Data Layer, and then you have this big orange Create Your Own button. And from that Create Your Own button, you have all of these different options of different types of formats you can upload. So like I just mentioned, we found an Esri server. So we're going to select the Esri option. And it's going to open this layer applet on the right-hand side. And it kind of guides you through the process. So it says enter the URL. That just means that website address that we just copied. And then we're going to click Fetch Layers from this service. Some API endpoints actually have multiple layers contained within them, so it might prompt you to choose which layer from the service you want to add. This one only had one layer included. So then I'm just going to click Save That Layer. I could have given it a different name, but Demolitions is great for me. It tells me the story. And now I can see all of that information load into my project. It's all of these orange dots. All of those dots represent a demolition permit in this data set. So that's already great, super useful to see all of these demolition permits. But what I might want to do is explore a little bit more into the details of what's being shown here. And that is where our data table comes in. So if I just click the three dots here next to this layer, I'm going to have a few more options. The first option is what we're going to spend a little bit of time on. That's going to open our data table. But I do want to show the other options here. So I can click Show Legend. And if this had a legend, as in like the dots were a different color based on different data, you would see that information show up here. Because all of the dots are the same color, there's no legend to speak of. The other thing you can see here is manage this layer. And because I uploaded this layer, I am the layer owner. And I'm like the default administrator of that layer in my workspace. So it lives in my workspace. But by default right now, I'm the only one who can really see it if I go searching for it in my layer library. So I might want to invite other folks in my workspace to view that. And I can do that by just selecting my workspace from this dropdown and clicking invite. And then everyone on my team would have access to this layer. Or I can just invite specific people, like maybe perhaps you have an internal server that's very private, it's customer specific, you don't want other, the whole team to have access to it, but people working on this project need access to it. You can type their specific emails in here and invite them to have access to that layer. There's some other options in here if you are super advanced. If you like to code and you know GeoJSON, you can actually jump in here and edit the default styling and information that's contained in this layer with your typical style definitions using JSON. So that's really cool for the people who are super technical. People love that. That is not me. I like styling using the data table. So let's take a look at that. So here I am going to open lens controls, like I mentioned before. And immediately this table opens here at the bottom of my screen. I can expand the table larger if I want to. And the table is literally a list of every single point that we were seeing on the map. But this way you can see all of the metadata that is attached to each one of those points. It would be the same thing if it was a data set that contained lines or polygons. Each row would be a single shape contained in the data set with the information attached to it. Because this is a very familiar format, it becomes pretty easy to work with and to understand what you're doing with your map. So the first thing you could do is kind of sort your list. And the list by default right now looks like it's being sorted by object ID. That's not super useful. Maybe I want to see all of the points that are closest to the center of my screen first. So I can click sort by distance to center of map, and it'll reorient this, this list to be by the map center. Another way that I could sort it is by, your typical kind of table controls, is I could go into a specific column and say, actually, maybe I want it sorted by the address name. And I can just pick ascending. And then if I turn off sort by map, it'll readjust to being sorted by the address name. Super easy, super simple to understand. Where this starts being really useful is the ability to add filters to this data set. And you'll notice when we start doing that, that it's also going to affect our map. So if I click add filter here, I'm going to see all of my columns here as options to filter by. So this is the same list as if I was scrolling horizontally in my columns. And I'm going to filter this by application type. And then I can select which application type I want to see. So I only want to see demos that were applied by contractors. And as soon as I apply that filter, my map has filtered down, and also my list has filtered down to only include the ones where the applicant type is contractor. So that's really useful for searching for information. Other use cases for this is if you use a parcel data set, searching for parcels that meet a certain zoning requirement. If you are doing demographics research, filtering the US Census data, census tracts by the amount of home ownership or by family composition to help improve your unit mix decisions. So lots of really excellent information by diving into your data and using those filters. The other thing that I love to do with Lens is actually styling my data. So right now, as you saw when I loaded this in, all of my dots are just orange. Doesn't tell me a whole lot except the location of where those demolition permits were applied. What is more useful is if I come into style here, this little paint palette, I can color these using a color scale and apply color based on data within based on the data about these points. So maybe I want to color this by type of work. And as soon as I do that, each of the dots receive a color automatically based on the value in their type of work field. So it's a really easy way to visualize that. Personally, I hate this first color palette that gets assigned. So I love to come in here and change my colors. I like this pastel one a little bit more, but you can even change your colors completely manually. Like maybe this city demolition is the most important to me. So I'm going to make it like bright, bright orange, and then it'll stick out to me on the map if there were any city demolitions in this region, of course. But you get the idea there that adding that styling and customizing can be really useful. Further things that I can do with this table is if I found a section of these points that were really useful for me, if I sort by sort of map center and then select using the table, maybe, this selection set is super useful for me. I can actually copy those points right into my giraffe project by just clicking this plus sign here. And now these points are completely editable. So I can even further style them if I wish. I could add an offset and make them larger. I could add labels to them, all kinds of things. So once you sort of find the information within that data set that's useful to you, you can take it the step further. I did a webinar last week on Giraffe for Planners that shows you a lot of details on how to use that use case for doing sort of an upzoning study. So that's another use case for that. Other things I can do here is export my table. So I can export the list that is available within my table here. And that can either be a selection set, the entire table, or what's visible. And then I get that data as a CSV. And that can be really useful outside of Giraffe as well. Other options you have here is you can, it highlights cells that have invalid information in them. Like sometimes, human error, they might put something that is text in a cell that's actually meant to be a number. And you can kind of do some QA, QC that way. And also showing cell types. So you can show whether that cell is a text cell or a number cell or might be area. So there's like different types of data. So you can sort of view that as well through those settings. So data table is pretty new. We've had Lens for a while, but it has not been as interconnected with its table until a couple of weeks ago. So we're really excited about that new feature. And I think it makes your vector data uploads that much more valuable. So love showing that off. Before I dive into showing a few more data types and how you can upload them, I do just want to pause because that was a lot of information dump. And if anyone has any questions, like I said before, feel free to unmute and ask them, or you can drop them in the meeting chat.
Yeah, Holly, that was really great. Really appreciate it. My only question was, the demolitions data you pulled in, for instance, is kind of a living data set, right? It evolves. Yep. It's not really static. So let's say a month goes by and we want to kind of refresh the data. What's going to be the most effective way to do that?
Yeah. So the reason I pulled in the Esri API is actually partly because I knew it was a data set that got refreshed often. And the great part about having it be an API connection is that it updates automatically. So anytime the city makes changes to this data, we're going to receive that in Giraffe as soon as they publish it. If we're uploading a point in time data set, which we'll look at next, one of my best practice recommendations is putting the date that you uploaded it in the file name or in the description. And that way, like, if I'm looking at something that says it was uploaded over a year ago and it's, maybe it's parcel outlines or something like that, might be a good idea to go look and see if there's a more up-to-date version than what we have in our current workspace. So let me show you that now. I see you're unmuted, so feel free to.
No, that was great. I just kind of wanted to confirm that, anytime you plug in an API, you're always looking at real-time data.
As real-time as the data provider. Yeah.
Sure. That's great. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So let's upload some more sample data here. And let's do a shapefile next. So I'm just going to grab my vector here. And this, because like I mentioned, it's a point in time data set. I'm going to browse for a file on my computer. Before I open that file on my computer, though, I actually want to open it up for you so you can see what it looks like. If you're not super familiar with geospatial data, sometimes shape files trip you up because it's actually a zip. So I'm going to just pull my window on over here. And you'll see this neighborhoods Philadelphia.zip. That is my shapefile. And I'm not going to unzip it because I actually need everything in that zipped directory for this to work. That's just how shapefiles are formatted. But if I click inside of here, you'll kind of see everything that's included. It's got something that is .shape, but it's also got a DBF, a PRJ, SBX, all kinds of additional things. And all of these files together is what makes this data set something that's usable. So I'm just going to click Browse here and go to my desktop where that's located, and just grab this file and just upload it right as that zip. So a cool thing with shapefile and other sort of point in time uploads that are vector is that I can actually style this before I even save it. And that gives me the ability to control what that style looks like for everyone else in my workspace who might be using this file. So let me just zoom out a little bit. So I've got the full view of Philadelphia. My great home city here. And I actually want to color this by the neighborhood name so that I have this nice styled view. There's so many neighborhoods here that some of them are getting colors that makes it a little bit hard to maybe really differentiate them on the map. So I can come in here and give them some custom colors. That's a really ugly color. Sorry, Belmont. But as I go through here, I'm just sort of grabbing the ones that got turned gray and making them a color that's more differentiated, just for my own personal preference. Great, good enough. So I'm going to save that, and you'll see those update. There's a lot, so I probably missed some. But then I can just click next here, and then give this layer a different name. It by default just grabs that zip file name, so sometimes it's kind of ugly, so you can update that. And then, like I mentioned before, best practice for these uploads is to put the upload date in the either layer name or the layer description. So I can give this a name like Philly Hoods uploaded March 2024. Not that the Philly neighborhood outlines ever update, but you get the idea. And then I'll just save that layer. And it's been added to my project. This is also one that I can use Lens on again, so I can sort, I could filter. Maybe I wanted to see what the largest neighborhood is so that I could, apply a sort and have the biggest one be at the top. Interestingly, it's the airport neighborhood. I wouldn't have thought that, but cool. I learned something new today. So that is your vector upload. It'll be the same process if you're uploading a GeoJSON or a KML or a CSV. But I do want to demo CSV because it is kind of interesting how you can upload it into Giraffe. So I'm actually going to open up that CSV data set that I've got here, just in Excel, and bring this over. And this is a list of all of the hospitals in Philadelphia. We've got a bunch, which is awesome. You have a lot of choices here. But what happens when you upload a CSV in Giraffe is right now it is an address search. And what it does is it searches for addresses and then places a point at each of those address points. To make that work the best, you're going to want a column that is called address. But I actually want an address column that has the street address, the city, and the state all in one single field. So what I like to do before I go forward is do this and sort of combine together all of my fields here. Bring that all the way down. And then I can actually remove, I do need to, I'll just copy and then paste as values. And then I can get rid of this original address and call this one address. And now I'm going to make sure that I'm not finding 4900 Frankfurt Ave in Los Angeles. It's going to find the one that is in Philadelphia because I've added that city name into my address column. And now that I've done that, I can just pop over to my data layer. And actually this one, I'll show you this cool thing where if you just drag and drop a compatible file type into Giraffe, it'll automatically start uploading that for you. So it's gonna upload the file, bring in all of those points like I showed you. Here's all of my hospitals and they've all gotten a point assigned to them. And then I can just click next, save the layer, and I'm good to go. So if you want to save a little time and you like drag and drop, it's available to you for any point in time vector data. So GeoJSON, zip, KML, CSV, upload all of them by just dragging them into your window. Okay, I'm going to pause again. Any questions about point in time vector uploads? Awesome. Sounds like no. So I will jump to a couple of more data types here. Another one that is an API endpoint that's going to look different is WMS. And this is what your WMS API endpoint looks like as opposed to your Esri one. But it's really the same idea. It's still live. It's still, as soon as they update something in this server, you'll get those changes in Giraffe. You just have to look out for slightly different things. So what's going to be important in your WMS URL is that it contains the words get capabilities. So you'll see that here at the end of this URL. You need that type of service to be able to connect to it in Giraffe. So again, I can copy this URL, grab that data layer. This one is going to be your WMS upload. And then I can just paste that URL in and fetch from that service. This is what I was mentioning before, where services can have multiple layers within. So it's asking me which layer I want to add. And I like the idea of this Philadelphia imagery. So I'm going to grab that one and just bring it into my project. So that's pretty cool. We do have by default satellite in Giraffe, but sometimes your local municipality does their satellite updates more often or maybe in a higher resolution than that global satellite data set. So it's really nice when you can find that information. So there's that WMS. And then another one that's really cool is Mapbox Studio. So you probably notice in Giraffe when you're playing around in here, that we have these Mapbox sort of information on our screen. And that's because the Giraffe map is built on a Mapbox base. So it's a really robust system for building really beautiful maps. And because we're built on that system, you can build your own Mapbox base maps and then use those in Giraffe. So if I go to data layer, I will see my option to use Mapbox Studio. And then I can just paste in my URL. And I also need my token, which do I remember my token? This is a good example here. So I would just go to my Mapbox account. And in my Mapbox account, I might have different map styles that, oh, interesting. They need my full name all of a sudden. They're trying to talk to me. I might have all kinds of different map styles that are ones that I like using. All I have to do with that map style is make it public. So you can see here that it's published. When I click in here, I can show you how to do that. So this is the style that I'm going to be uploading here. And when I go to share, I'm going to have all of these options. These are showing up because I've already made this public. When you open up one that isn't public yet, it'll just have a button that says make this public, and then you'll get all of these links. And when you scroll down to developer resources, that's where you're going to see your style URL and your token. So if I grab this token and pop back over to Giraffe and just paste this in, I can get all of my layers from that data set. So you can see this Mapbox style is made out of like tons and tons and tons of layers. So if I just liked, for instance, the point of interest label, and I wanted those as a style in my Giraffe project, I could bring those in. But there's another way to override your base map style if you just really like, there's no symbols showing up here, probably because there aren't any point of interests out there in Northeast Philly where I was. But if I like that whole style and want to bring that in, I actually don't do it from layers because it'll be kind of a pain to bring all of those separate layers into my project. Here we go. We've got those points of interest showing up now. But I can do it from my view options, which I actually have to save the project to do that. So let me jump into an already saved project so I can bring in this base map style and we can look at that. Okay, so I'll go to my view options, and then here I can change the actual map style. So we have a few different map styles built right into Giraffe, but I can also just paste my style URL right here and override it that way. Use this custom style. My internet may choose not to participate. The other place you can do this is in here. It does have that style URL there, so I think I just need to refresh. And then we'll see it. Yeah. So now I've got that nice blueprint style as my base map style. Ooh, cool. So if you want to get really crazy and really style the looks of your presentations, using those Mapbox style options is a really good way to go. Yeah, so that is about what I wanted to show you all here. So we've gone through what even is a geospatial layer. That's where we started, if you can believe it. We talked about the types of data that Giraffe is compatible with, which data types I prefer using personally because they give me that option of using Lens. And then we went through the Lens data table, all of the settings, all of the ways that you can filter and sort and style. And then we uploaded a few different data types. Pretty cool, lots of compatibility and interoperability there with all of those different options. And, then at the end, we got to even changing the base map style using Mapbox. So going really, really deep there. Really excited that you all chose to join us today. And I hope it was helpful and that, you'll start loading in that data from probably those 50 other open tabs that you might have open next to your Giraffe with your city zoning and your county requirements and your parcel map. Often those are all in different locations from your government entities. Now you can bring them all into your one window in Giraffe and just use them as context when you're designing. So yeah. Thanks again for joining me, and I will hang out for a bit. If anyone has any more detailed questions or want to walk through a specific use case, happy to hang out and help out.